o'clock. We're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Todd Stone. I'm the Oklahoma City councilman for Ward 4, which is southeast Oklahoma City. And I really appreciate everyone showing up here tonight. I appreciate the Rock Church allowing us to use this beautiful facility. It's going to be a great meeting place for us. Before I get started, my 2 minutes worth, I would like to acknowledge Representative Wolfe that's here. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening to your constituents. We have the Ward 4 Traffic Planning Commissioner, Walter Kula, is here. We have our Planning Commissioner here as well, Mike Privet. So thank you guys for showing up. I appreciate it. So the purpose of this meeting is, it's an informational meeting only. There's no one speaking tonight that represents OTA or PO Associates. I just really wanted to have a meeting with those potentially that could be affected to get the information out. We're going to have 2 speakers tonight. Mr. Dave Moore will be speaking, talking about some of the efforts underway to stop the turnpike and letting you know that there are some other avenues out there that you can have your voice heard in. And then we will hear from Attorney David Box. He's a land use attorney. I saw some rumors out there that he's associated with OTA. He's not. He, if anything, he's on the opposite side of that argument, I believe. He'll be able to tell you more about that. But I wanted him here to speak so that in case the turnpike does go through and in case it could affect you, I want you to know what kind of steps are going to take place so that you can be prepared. And I want everyone to make sure that they'll be able to be made whole on their property. So with that, like I said, it's an informational meeting tonight, and we've sent out the cards with questions. If you have a question pop up in your mind that you think any of us 3 can answer, when we get through with the presentations, we'll try to answer those. If any of those are directed towards OTA or PO, I'll be more than happy to take and give those to them and forward them on. But I don't think there's going to be anyone up here we need to yell at or scream at. I think we're all in the same boat. I can tell you personally, I'm affected by it as well. And with that, I'll turn it over to Dave Moore. Dave?
Thank you, Councilman.
Thank you.
You bet. Thank you. If you can't see this screen very well, I encourage you to move to where you can see it, because you're going to want to see what's on this screen. And that's my daughter. That's when she was about 6. And one of our favorite things to do was go fishing in little farm ponds around East Norman and Cleveland County. And it's still one of our favorite things to do, but now she's 36. In fact, today is her birthday. Happy birthday, girl. But I am not a great public speaker. I'm not trained at it. I can get by, okay? I mainly teach classes about cybersecurity at libraries and public events and things like that, but there's my first major experience in public speaking. That's me. The long-haired guy with the striped shirt and the overalls on. That's me. That was in 1999 because I read an article in the newspaper. Well, it wasn't much of an article. It was a little clip, about 3 inches high and 1 inch wide, buried on page 7. It said, there's going to be a public meeting at VOTEC about this new highway project, and here's a website you can go look at if you want to know more about it. So I did. Oh, it was called VOTEC back then. Now it's more Norman, technical, VOTEC, So I went to the meeting, and I was shocked, as were most of the people that showed up, because nobody saw anything like this coming. And so a bunch of us got up, and because there was a comment section. Unlike OTA meetings these days, there was a section where the public got up to say things in front of a microphone, like, what about this, or what about that? And so I did. And then I wrote a letter to the Norman Transcript newspaper complaining about the situation, and I made the mistake of putting my phone number in it. My phone didn't stop ringing for 6 months. No kidding. I was up to my neck in alligators every day. And this is what we did. And so we had a meeting over at the Norman Public Library. It was crowded. It was wall-to-wall people. Tom was there. And we just said, okay, folks, what do you think? Well, it wasn't hard to figure out what they thought. And so, I don't know if you can see this or not. This is one of the things, they had 5 different routes they wanted people to think about. Let's see, right there's Thunderbird, okay, and Draper. There's Thunderbird, yeah. And, oh, sorry, there's Thunderbird, there's Draper, right there. So most of the routes went right through here in between Thunderbird and Draper. Same kind of deal you're seeing today. And we said no. And we said no in a very loud way. And thousands of people said no. It wasn't just us in Norman. All of a sudden, it's exploding because this highway is supposed to start, it was supposed to start around Norman and swing around and go all the way up to Arcadia and Edmond. And so people in Edmond started finding out what's going on. And they started organizing meetings. In fact, that guy right there, Jerry Soker, told me, he said, I thought I was waiting for Moses to come along and take my hand and lead me to the promised land, and then I realized I was the one out front waving the flag. That was me and him and a whole bunch of other people. And we learned things, we researched things. Most of the stuff that we did, we pulled right out of the Department of Transportation's documents because it wasn't just OTA. It was the Oklahoma Department of Transportation, it was the Association of Central Oklahoma Governments, and the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority. All 3 of those groups are doing all of this, and they're basically saying, here we come, people, we're coming. You better get out of the way. Well, we didn't want to get out of the way. And so eventually, the Norman City Council passed a resolution against it. So did the, sometimes they're called the city trustees. But it was the Norman City Council, the councils of Jones, Choctaw, and Arcadia. They said, nope, we're not doing it. And finally, they backed off. They said, okay, forget about it. We can't take it. You guys are too much. We quit. And so we thought they were quitting. That was 23 years ago. And here we are today. $5 billion. With a B billion. $5 billion. So I'm here to tell you tonight how this project is bad for the economy, bad for the environment, bad for the watershed and water supply, bad for wildlife, and bad for all Oklahoma citizens. Because everybody in Oklahoma has to be involved and it's going to touch everybody. So here we are, out of control borrowing and spending. At current levels, the way things are going, $5 billion they wanted to buy bonds with, it will take 180 years to pay them back, and that's just the principal. That's not even the interest. So this is out of control borrowing and spending. Now, I think it's appropriate at this time to mention that the Oklahoma Republican Party platform, I'm quoting from it right here. This is on their website today. This is the platform that Governor Stitt campaigned on. We support a moratorium on the creation of additional turnpikes in Oklahoma until existing turnpikes have been paid off and turned into free roads and given to the state. In addition, we oppose the use of eminent domain to build and operate toll roads. That's what the Republican Party platform says right now if you go to the website. I pointed this out to a couple of, I call them big shot Republican Party guys in Norman, Cleveland County, and they're like, really? It says that? Yes, sir, it does. I didn't make it up. They'd go look it up and they'd call me back and go, oh boy, this is good, isn't it? I'm like, well, is it? I don't know. But this is what it says. This is the campaign that Governor Stitt campaigned on. So, now, the roads were supposed to be paid off in 6 years from now. They were going to be paid off and turned into free roads, okay? No, we can't do that. Oh my goodness, that would be bad for somebody's business. Wouldn't be bad for our business. They were going to be paid off. So I think it's appropriate to ask a question of our governor. Are you going to honor that campaign promise? Are you? I don't know if he is or not. He's got time. He's got till November anyway, probably, but it's a good question. And by the way, I'm not a Republican. I'm not a Democrat, okay? I dislike both parties equally. I'm a registered independent. But I expect if I'm going to vote for somebody and they make a promise to me, they need to keep it. So, all right. You can't quite see that, can you? That says, there's the map, okay? Here's what they're proposing. There's Thunderbird right there. There's Draper. Here's the route. Then here's the route going down Indian Hills. Here's this. Here we go. Oh, well. 600 to 800 homes destroyed. Hopes and dreams crushed. Property rights crushed. Families forced out. And land use in the area will be altered forever. There's another shot of it. There's Ward 4 right there. Kind of funny boundary lines, but there it is. And so, there's why you're here tonight if you live in Ward 4. There it is. Hundreds of homes, hundreds of people, hundreds of families. So a lot of people are looking at a lot of different aspects about these proposed toll road routes. We're looking at the environment, we're looking at wildlife, we're looking at the watershed and our water supply. We're looking at the toll that it takes on people, on humans. Okay, so there's the Lake Thunderbird watershed right there. There's Thunderbird, there's Draper, and all of these little creeks and things feed right in to our water supply right there. And here we got these two proposed toll roads going right smack dab the middle of it. This is bad news.
Just a second, I want to see this a little closer.
Yes,
sorry,
ma'am.
My eyes aren't that good. But
This is the same one that Amy Serrato showed at her presentation at OTA. Yeah. Right smack dab in the middle of the watershed.
Excuse me.
Bad news. Bad, bad, bad. What are these people thinking? Are they thinking? There will be tremendous carnage. Okay, and let's see if I can read that. I'm sorry, folks. This screen looked bigger in my living room. It did. It looked huge. Wildlife will eventually be trapped in a desert bounded by I-35 to the west, I-240 to the north, Highway 9 to the south, and the proposed toll road running alongside the lake. Because most wildlife look at a major highway, they're not crossing that thing. You turn around and you go back. Now, here's the bottom line. If, and to me this is a big if, okay? If the OTA is allowed to continue their plans to build their toll road, if they're allowed to go through eminent domain proceedings and condemnation, if they are, and if you refuse, this is going to be you. If you refuse. And I mean, we all know that, right? But we just kind of don't want to really face it. I don't. Who wants to do that? But here come the sheriff deputies. They will drag you out of your home and probably arrest you. And then the bulldozers will smash down your house. At a meeting that I went to in 1999, it was a meeting with me and Jerry from Edmond and a couple other people from around the area. And Arcadia Mayor Marilyn Morell was there. Marilyn Morell was awesome. She was an old school civil rights activist from the 60s. She learned nonviolent resistance and techniques like that, Martin Luther King Jr. style. She was awesome, and she stood up at that meeting. We're talking about this and that and the other things. She said, "Dave," yes ma'am, "I will chain myself to any bulldozer that tries to put a highway through my town." That's what she said. Now, I was just 23 years ago, I was 45, okay? I'm not 45 anymore. But she impressed me when she said that because she meant it. And then she invited us up to a meeting up there in Arcadia at a church they had up there, and those people meant it too. They weren't messing around. So, this is what we want to avoid. Now, Eminent domain abuse is not a new thing. Back in the 99, 98, that's when I got my crash education in what eminent domain was, and it wasn't what I thought it was. It has evolved over the decades and decades into a complete perversion of what is actually in the Constitution for the United States of America. Completely different. We'll talk about that here in a second, but eminent domain abuse, it happens all the time. This is my stance. This is the stance of a lot of people that I work with in this group. We believe that governments need to prove, and this is what I thought eminent domain was, you need to prove an urgent, overriding need, demonstrating that there is absolutely no other way to serve and protect the public than by exercising eminent domain and forcibly taking a citizen's private property. So, don't listen to what a lot of people are going to tell you. This is not a done deal. It is not a done deal by a long shot. There we are, back in 1999. We did it back then. We can do it today. The Norman City Council passed a resolution just like they did in 99. They did it a couple of weeks ago. It was awesome. So did the Cleveland County Commissioners. That was a good one. So, slowly but surely, I think we're seeing, you probably know stories from the Bible about they all circled the city and they all smashed their pots together and that city came tumbling down, right? So slowly but surely there are little chinks that are showing up in their armor. If you want to know more, this is a video that I recommend you go see. It's on YouTube. That's the address for it. It's very informative because when I worked on that thing for probably 4 or 5 days, and when I was done with it and I sat back and watched it, I cried. Because it's not me, it's everybody out here. This is a very powerful thing because they're messing with people's lives. So I recommend you go watch it. Watch it on YouTube. See what you think. And then you can visit this website and you can join with us and continue on because this is not a done deal. So it's been my honor to stand up here before you and speak because when I do these things, I realize I get to meet the greatest people in the world doing this sort of thing. So thank you, Councilman. That's my piece.
Thank you, Dave. Appreciate that. Let me go ahead and introduce our next speaker. This is Attorney David Box. He's a land use attorney in Oklahoma City. Also very familiar with the eminent domain process. I believe did some work on the kickapoo stuff. Might have some clients on that, and probably has some currently on this. So I'll let you discuss that a little bit.
Yeah.
Thanks, David.
Thank you, Councilman. So my name is David Box. I'm a real estate attorney, and a big part of my practice is eminent domain. We do both sides. We represent one condemning authority, but the rest of our work is representing landowners against ODOT, OTA, municipalities, and any other condemning authority than the one that I represent. So I don't have Facebook, but when I arrived here, I was told by somebody that there was a rumor on Facebook that I was somehow integrated with OTA or ODOT or represented them. That is not true. We have multiple pending cases right now against ODOT on condemnation matters, again, on behalf of the landowner. And I have several clients already on various aspects of this project that they announced. So what I'd like to do is just briefly walk you through what eminent domain is, what to expect as part of the process, and then I'd be happy to answer any questions you have. So I'm not going to come at it from the same position that the previous speaker did. My take on it is going to be if in fact the turnpike does move forward and you are not a willing seller at that time, what you might expect. So if we assume that the turnpike is going to move forward with their project, what you can expect is the turnpike will outsource almost all of their work. They've already outsourced the design to PO. PO may or may not also be involved in the acquisition phase. If they're not, they will outsource that to a subcontractor who will be engaged to go acquire as many of the parcels as they can without eminent domain. So what you can expect at that point is you will be assigned some form of right-of-way agent that will be contacting you, sending you letters in an effort to try to acquire your property through negotiation. Now, if you have a home or a business that will be displaced, you have additional rights under the Federal Act as a displaced person or displaced business. That will come with a whole other set of folks that are there, in theory, designed to try to help you find a suitable relocation property. But if, in fact, you get to a point in which you don't come to an agreement or you can't negotiate in a manner that you believe to be favorable for you, they will file a lawsuit in whatever the county is that you own property. Most of it's going to be in Cleveland County. That lawsuit will set off a series of events that become very important to you protecting your rights. What that lawsuit seeks to do is to appoint 3 commissioners, or what's called disinterested freeholders under the statutes, to serve as commissioners and independent evaluators of the value of the property. Because the Constitution, yes, allows OTA and other types to condemn private property, but they are limited in that they must do so in a manner in which they pay what's entitled just compensation. And so just compensation is what you would be entitled to if your property is condemned. Just compensation has been defined as the value of the property plus any damages to the property remaining. So there's a couple types of takings. You would have a total take in which perhaps the OTA would take all of the property you have. The more common is what's called a partial taking, where they will take a portion of it and there will be some remaining land left. That is where you are entitled to not only the value of what's actually physically taken, but the value of the damages created by virtue of the taking. So when the court appoints these 3 people, you have a say in who those people are, just like the OTA has a say in who those people are. They will get appointed. They will go out to the site. Oftentimes the court will provide instructions to the commissioners so that when they're on the site, they understand what the playbook and the rule book is for their evaluation. They don't have to be appraisers. In Cleveland County and larger counties, it's often easy to find people that are appraisers, but the only qualification is that they own property within the county and that they're disinterested, so that they have no bias. They don't have a financial interest in the project or in the subject property. So what will happen is the 3 people will go out on site. Those 3 people will come up with a figure, and that figure is what's called the report of commissioners. They will file that document with the figure in the district court, and at that moment, the OTA would be required to pay whatever the dollar figure is into the court. The moment that the OTA pays that figure into the court, they own the rights subject to the petition. So if they are seeking to condemn your house, the moment they pay that money in, technically they own the house. Now, if you currently live there, again, there are some protections that you have under the Federal Act as a displaced person that you would be able to engage in, but they own the rights sought in the petition. Now, that report of commissioners will set off 2 very important deadlines. You would have 30 days in which to file what's called an exception to the report of commissioners. That filing is challenging the right of the OTA to take, and there are 2 forms in which the challenge can take form. You can challenge the right, as if they actually don't have the right to take, or you can challenge the scope of the taking if you believe they're taking more than perhaps they need for the project. I will tell you, in my experience, those are very, very hard to prove. When a landowner is able to prove that the taking was not proper or that the scope was exceeded, it is a landmark case. The OTA, unfortunately, has the right to take your property, and my belief is they will move forward with this project. Now, the question is timing. It's a very large project. They announced and put out that map, and it is a substantial project that will take years, if not decades, to complete. To my knowledge, they don't have any phasing schedule other than my belief is the first phase will be the Tri-City to I-35. Second phase is likely to be east of the I-35 along Indian Hills, but that's about all I can gather. And so the rest of it is a complete unknown, and so it leaves folks like you in a bad spot because you know what the future looks like, but you don't know when that future is going to get here. So my best advice is, you need to stay informed, you need to understand the process, and you need to have people that you can trust to go fight and help protect your interests, because I'm not sure where he went. I respect, the fight, and it's certainly a worthy cause. I would be hard pressed to advise you to take the approach of thinking you can stop it. My best advice is to assume that it's going to happen and do whatever you can to fight for the most money. Because again, you're entitled to just compensation. And so if they're going to come, the only way you can really fight is fighting for the most amount of money, fighting for comparable properties and things like that. So I had a lot of the cases on the last time the OTA did this, but we did all of our work on the western side. And so at the same time they were doing the Kickapoo in eastern Oklahoma County, in western Oklahoma County, they were connecting the John Kilpatrick to Highway 152. And I had just about every parcel over there were clients of mine, and we took the approach that it's going to happen, and we're going to be better served if we go sit down at a negotiating table and try to get as much money as possible. A big group of people tried to hire me on the eastern loop, but they wanted to hire me to go fight it to stop it. And what I told them was, I didn't think I could stop it. I think that they had the right to take it, and they will take it. And that, be careful, you will find a lawyer that will take your money, that will tell you what you want to hear, and will tell you that you're going to go stop it. You're going to be better served trying to get as much money as possible. And so on the western loop, we sat at closing tables. My clients sold their properties, and in a manner that was favorable to them. And for years, and in fact, I think there's still some cases going on, people are still fighting that eastern loop, and it's there. You could drive on it today. And I don't know that the people that decided to fight it and hire lawyers to stop it ended up any better than they would have been had they just taken the approach that it's going to happen. How do we protect ourselves financially? Because I do think it's going to happen. So that's a bit about the process. I believe that these things usually work better if I just start answering questions. So if the councilman's okay with that, perhaps we could just start taking questions.
Sure.
All right. A lot of the questions, I was glancing through some of these cards, and I appreciate everyone providing these. A lot of these are OTA type questions, and it kind of becomes a critical point for me. Part of me wanted to have OTA at this meeting to try and answer some of these questions, but the other part of me didn't necessarily want OTA here because I wanted us to be able to have an open communication and a realistic communication, and I think we've done that. I mean, as you can see, there's two sides of let's fight this thing, but let's also be prepared in case it does go through to make sure that we're made whole. So I'm going to run through these questions, and I'll just tell you right now, if they're strictly OTA questions, if you don't mind, I'm going to take the card and I will forward them to OTA and let them address them. So there is a question here in regards to the bridge that's being redone on Douglas Boulevard, south of 149th. And the question is, did that really relate to the turnpike or traffic to Tinker? The answer to that is no. That bridge, I don't know how many of you are familiar with that bridge, but it's a wooden tread, single lane bridge that's set at a 45-degree angle to Douglas Boulevard. And it's been a very, very unsafe bridge. When I was first elected, actually I had a constituent call me that had lost a son on that bridge. They were new into town, he was driving at night, and unfortunately struck that bridge and was deceased. And that was something that was very important to me and for the safety of our folks to make sure that we did get that addressed. Why haven't they looked at other routes? That's an OTA question, and I will certainly make sure that we forward that to them. 600 homes is a lot of people to move. I absolutely agree with that. Why would they let people build on the property knowing they were going to take it? That's another great question. I've seen there on Indian Hills, as you know, new properties springing up all the time through there. And as I drive by a lot of them, I'm like, man, that's a neat place. And boom, it was like a week later, I was driving by the same thing going, I hate that they just built that new fantastic place there. Go ahead.
So one of the reasons, why do they let people build? They have no legal rights at this time to say no. And if they did, they'd be subject to a lawsuit called inverse condemnation. If they sought to assert rights before they have any legal rights, they would find themselves in the reverse of this condemnation process. And so all they can do is put out a map like this. Now, the method of which that they went about it, I'm not sure the strategy they went involved in that, but they don't have the means or the legal ability to stop people from doing anything until they undertake the formal process of either buying it through negotiation or filing the condemnation action.
Why, I thought they would have to inform you that they were thinking of putting a turnpike through here.
So the question is, don't they have to inform you that they're thinking of putting the turnpike? The answer is no. Now, what they have to inform you of is when they need to take your property. But they're not obligated under the law, whether we think they should be or not, they're not obligated under the law to tell you what their long-term planning is. My guess is they thought they were doing that when they released those maps. But of course it had the reverse effect. It set out panic, rightfully so. But they're not obligated to tell you what their long-term plans are. All they're obligated to tell you is when and if they need your property, that they're now interested in acquiring it.
But what rights do the people have then? If we go and move somewhere else, how do we know in another 10 years they're not going to come and boom, well, we need to take this for another turnpike?
Yeah, so the question is what rights do the people have, and then if we move somewhere, how do we know that another turnpike's not going to come through? So the rights that you have are you are entitled to just compensation. So you are entitled to be made whole, you're entitled to the value of what's taken plus damages to the remainder, and that's where somebody, representing you can be of assistance. Now, how could you know that you could move somewhere in which there won't be a turnpike? The reality is, the answer is you could never do that. Whether it's OTA or some other entity, of course, there's always a chance that some form of condemnation would happen. So it would be virtually impossible to say, short of moving downtown, where perhaps they'd have to take the Devon Tower or something, and they're not likely to do that. Short of living in a fully developed area like a central part of a city, you're not likely to be guaranteed never again.
But there's not enough money that they can pay me for my home. I built it to live there, I built it to die there.
Yeah.
So what right do they have to take something that's ours and revert our whole life for?
Yeah, so the question is, there's not enough money to get them to move, and what rights do they have to do this? And so that ultimately, if it goes the condemnation route, you are always able to go put this thing in front of a jury. And it's a jury of your peers that ultimately decide what you're entitled to from a financial standpoint. But they have the right, pursuant to the Constitution, to take. And it's just a matter of, unfortunately, money at this point. And whether you negotiate favorably through sitting across the table from the OTA or the right-of-way acquisition folks, or ultimately you end up in a jury trial where 12 of your peers will decide what you're owed, that is the only way to get made whole, whether you think it's whole or not. The only way to do it is financially.
So is there a possibility that we could all work together here as people that do not want this turnpike to maybe get it stopped as representing our own Oklahoma State? I am the same way that young lady is up there in the front. I built my house in forever home. I plan to die there too. I raised my family there, my children, my grandchildren. So am I supposed to just let that go?
No, and that's why we had Dave Moore speak first.
So we do have a right to fight.
So you have a right to fight, and that's why Dave, thank you, Dave, came out and spoke, is that, look, here's the steps. I mean, when he puts up those links and says, go check out these people on Facebook, for instance, go let your voice be heard there.
Okay.
I can tell you, for instance, right here, there's really, it's a good question. In front of me says, will Oklahoma City Council oppose this?
Only if we fight for it.
Well, here's the thing, personally, do I oppose it? Yes. Now, Oklahoma City Council can do a resolution, but I will tell you what a resolution means from the city. It means absolutely nothing. Nothing. It's a waste of everyone's time.
Right.
And the way that I try to work on stuff,
I don't agree with that at all.
you know?
No, sir.
Absolutely
All
not.
right, well, I'll just tell you, it has absolutely no legal bearing on anything.
You are correct there.
Thank you.
Well, that's what he meant.
And when I work on stuff, I work on stuff in a lot of different ways. I've contacted legislators that I have relationships. I've talked to municipal councilors, trying to see if there's things that we can actually do to make progress versus a resolution. And honestly, it irritates me a lot of times when I see people, even in Oklahoma City Council, they'll bring up resolutions on stuff, and it's like, why are we doing a resolution on this that makes absolutely no sense, other than it's wasting our time?
It's a statement.
And I don't mean to say that you
Oh,
shouldn't fight.
I'm making
You
a
should
statement.
absolutely fight.
I mean, the resolution.
Do so with an eye towards
I'll make
the
a
reality of what may happen. Don't put all of your
I just
eggs in the
did.
basket of stopping it. Go fight, do everything you can to stop it, but make sure you're prepared for the alternative.
You know, I thought we lived in the United States, and I used to be proud of that.
Mhm.
I think it sucks. But what?
I don't-
What's different from Russia and China and them? They just do it underhanded to the people. What
I
rights
can
do
say
you have
something
to
about
people?
that. I think, and now we're going to get philosophical, okay? Because this is an issue that people have been struggling with since the beginning of time, okay? Because you asked, what right do they have? In my opinion, they don't have a right. They have the ability. They've been given the ability to do it, but do they have the right to do it? That's a tough question. And so in my opinion, they do not. But I'm just one guy. Now we got 2 people. Now we got 10 people. Now we got 1,000 people. Now we got 10,000 people. Now we got city councils all around the whole Oklahoma City metro saying no. And even though the city council resolutions carry no legal weight, neither do the county commissioner's actions, but they make a statement. And the statements start to add up, and they add up, and they add up, and they have meaning. And so something that really bothered me from the very beginning of all of this, and it was one of those things I woke up in the middle of the night and I just went, oh crud, really? I'm going to go out on a limb here, brother. I hope you forgive me. But, okay, I shall do my best. We're dealing with people who don't care. They don't. They are sociopaths. A sociopath is someone who doesn't care about anybody else except themselves. And to them, we're just worms and bugs to be gotten out of the way. We're just obstacles to progress. Now, that's my opinion, okay? But it's the only thing that when I look at it, because these people don't want to be mean. Nobody wants to be hated for their job. Nobody wants to be known as the bad guy, right? Nobody wants to be tagged as the person that's kicking someone out of their home, but they're doing it anyway. And so the only conclusion I could come to is that they just don't care.
It wasn't too much of a limit. You want to go ahead
Yeah.
and take this one?
So the question is, how will you get compensated for having to purchase a new home at potentially higher interest rates than the current home? And that's a great question. The date of valuation becomes the date of take, which is the date that the OTA would put money into the court fund. And so what the law says is this is an extraordinary remedy that the government is undertaking to take private property. You are entitled to be made whole. And so being made whole becomes a very subjective discussion. And that's where you need someone representing you, and it's lawyers, it's appraisers, potentially engineers. Those are the people in your camp that get you whole and get you whatever the dollar figure is. If you get past the emotional piece of having to lose your home, there is a dollar figure that can make you whole financially, maybe not emotionally, but financially. And that's how it's done, through expert witnesses and things like that to put in front of either the OTA or ultimately a jury.
Does that mean the house, because it's devalued because there's going to be a turnpike through it, does the valuation go back before it got announced what it was, or what it is after it's been devalued?
Well, so it's not, it's devalued right now in mind only. Comparable sales would not reflect that. And what the law would require, and ultimately a court would instruct a jury on, is comparable sales is how we reach fair market value. So you have to actually look at sales that have taken place, and there won't be any that would impact it at this point. Again, at this point it's a stigma, but it's not reflected in the market. And it's got to be close in time to the date of take, and so that's where the appraiser would come in handy, but the impact of the project wouldn't impact the fair market value from an analysis standpoint in the district court action.
Our next door neighbor house is for sale. If they sell it at a loss during this time, will that affect my property value?
Well, again, comparable sales are subjective. And so the appraiser on your side is going to go look for the comparable sales that are most beneficial to you in the analysis. Why their house sold for a loss could be a multitude of reasons. Your question, I want to make sure I explain this too. I get a lot of questions about my property will be devalued, but the turnpike's not actually touching my property. Can I get compensated? The answer almost universally is no. The turnpike needs to actually be taking or needing your parcel to be able to be compensated for it. Even if it's a square inch, if they touch your property and they need it, then you're entitled to be compensated for what they're taking plus those damages to the remainder.
And this property is a turnpike normally take on either side.
It's an engineering function, usually it's a couple hundred feet. But if they're not physically touching, even if it devalues your property, the answer is you're not entitled to anything under this process.
How do you get comparable home sales on a piece of property that has
Hold on.
buildings and acreage and a lake and things like that on it? There are no other homes like that in my area.
So that's where, so the question is, if there's nothing truly comparable, how do you arrive at a dollar figure? And that's where you really need a good appraiser to be able to say, you know, there isn't anything truly comparable, so maybe we need to go look at other markets. So having a highly qualified MAI designated appraiser is who I always use for those complicated problems right there. Because this is going through an area that will take a lot of properties that are very unique, and there may not be anything within this market to compare it to. And so they're going to have to be able to go and grab things from other markets to be able to perform that analysis.
Great question. Sir?
Oh, I was just, how do they value noise pollution and other things of that nature?
You hear the screaming too?
So, no, if they're taking your property, again, there's one of the analysis you're talking about is, let's say they take a portion of it, the rest of your property, they're not taking, perhaps you have a house there, and therefore it's going to be in close proximity to the turnpike. Well, under that scenario, we want an appraiser, and perhaps we'd want some sort of acoustic expert to come up with figures and data to show why the house has been devalued or the commercial, whatever it is, has been devalued to a certain level and seek that compensation. But there are ways to do it. The 235, where it goes, where all the new projects just got done, right at 235 and 44, there was a big condemnation case for the Paragon building, which is a 7-story black office building. And one of the claims made in that case was noise pollution based upon the new flybridge that was going to be right next to it. So the way that you got to it there was to an acoustic expert to talk about decibel levels and what that means, and then you bring in a broker to talk about what those decibel levels mean for the ability to market that property moving forward, and a reduction in rent values, and therefore what that means for just compensation.
Wow.
Let me get through some of these cards. We've got a ton of them up here, and I appreciate it. And I assume that both you guys will stick around when we get through the meeting. So if you guys have some individual questions for them, keep them out here in the parking lot all night. That'll be a good deal for me. So.
Just make sure my kids are asleep, so I don't.
Bring us sandwiches.
I can tell you a lot of these questions. For instance, here's one. When will the final map be done? Don't know. You have any
Who
idea?
knows?
We don't know.
They won't say.
But those are ones that I'm gonna forward them to OTA. If you have your contact info on there, then my understanding is OTA will contact you and try to answer that question for you.
I'll get the mic.
I'm sorry, thank you. Sorry about that. I'm going to forward these to OTA. If you have your contact info on there, then they should respond to your question. If not, I'm hoping they'll put it on their website. I'm sure everyone got one of the small cards there that has the Access Oklahoma website on there, which is OTA's information. And there's not a lot of information there. It's a good website though, except I can't ever get the map to reload myself. Yes.
I want to follow up so you made a comment that it sounds like the lawyers are the only one that'll win. So there is a function within this process that if a jury comes in at a certain percentage above the report of commissioners, the condemning authority is required to pay 100% of your attorney fees, expert witness fees, costs, interest. So the law, although it doesn't feel like it, is slanted in favor of you once you get into the process because of the extraordinary remedy that the government is doing by taking your property. So there are cost functions that shift burden to the OTA under some scenarios. So only if you win, but then it gets into strategy on who you want to appoint as a commissioner, how you want to handle a commissioner meeting, because you don't want that number excessively high that you can't get a jury to come 10% above, but you can't lay behind the log. So there's a lot of strategy that goes into that for that reason, because of the cost shifting mechanism.
All right, thanks. Here's a question asking, what was the input that the cities had? Zero. I'm not aware of anyone at the city that had any idea on the route of this, the timing, the planning, anything like that. Which, yeah, it is a challenge for the cities because I can tell you we struggled a lot with the kickapoo up there, as you can imagine, with all the construction going on, tearing up roads and everything else the city was responsible for.
Can I follow up on that? That may have been my question.
Okay.
Aren't turnpikes usually meant to be regional to regional, be able to, transport traffic from one regional place to another regional place? But this was couched when they announced it as helping traffic for the locals and it's like, well, I moved out there because I wanted to be out in the country. I still was in Oklahoma City, but I wanted to be out in the country. And so it's not serving the regional to regional, it's disrupting what the city has responsibility for.
Right.
So I guess that's kind of the frustration too.
Yeah, I fully understand your frustration on that, and I agree with it. But the cities weren't involved. The extent of my knowledge, and I've talked to a lot of people at the city, no one that I know of was aware of any of this until that website hit. So, just in answer to your question.
Who decided to do this then?
Who decided to do
Who
it?
decided that they wanted this done?
OTA.
It wasn't our people.
So,
About 20 years ago, we've been out here 40 years, and we went to a meeting 20 years ago, and this was being proposed then.
yep.
And it went down.
It went down because
And then on that other side, it went through Choctaw and all through there
Mhm.
and out fast, so.
the difference,
Just come up.
yeah, I would say the big difference between 20 years ago,
All of the newspaper clippings and everything else from way back then.
right, and I,
Okay.
Kept the file folder.
because this guy's in a
Can I
lot
borrow
of them.
some of them?
I can tell you
If I
that
can find them.
I got a box.
what I see is the big difference between 20 years ago and now is that was ODOT. That was an ODOT project,
Well, it was ODOT, ACOG, and OTA. All three of them together. It was a joint venture.
and this one is only OTA. And I can tell you I represent Oklahoma City with ACOG, the Area Council of Governments, which is Oklahoma City and all the municipalities surrounding it. We had no clue as well. So all of the different entities that I know of or work with, we're all kind of blindsided on this thing, to be honest with you.
Well, the taxpayers are too.
Yeah,
We're paying for these roads, and we're a little bit shocked that some of them that have come through isn't something that we actually wanted. Nobody called anybody asking us for them, and if you don't even know about it, then what are we supposed to think?
Yeah, that's, I'm not
What's
disagreeing.
lose? We pay people to invest.
Does OTA need to show the need before using eminent domain? If not, is there a way to change the law so that they do?
Well, we need to tend to that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, there is. And actually, is the current Senate bill, it makes them, requires them to show the need, does it not?
Well, no, it requires them to do some studies. But as far as the eminent domain taking, it doesn't really require them to show an overriding need. Right, it's a little insufficient. I have a couple
Can I just make a point here?
Sure.
I've been working in this field as a citizen activist and a nonprofit executive director for 35 years. I've been trying to get Oklahomans to listen. I've been trying to get the Oklahoma City Council to listen. I told them not to destroy Oklahoma City Union Station. They did it anyway. And in doing that, they helped this situation out here.
You're talking about the bus station?
I'm talking about the rail facility, sir, where the new I-40 crosstown, a 10-lane, billion-dollar expressway that did not change one thing, sits today, except it got some people's pockets full for a while. Bottom line is this. After we fought this battle in 1999, and you can consider this partisan or otherwise, there was a guy.
Can you give him the mic, please? This lady can't hear him back here. And
I'm sorry,
This man has his face.
Yeah, if you want to come up and speak, I'll
Thank you, sir.
give you a minute. Got a lot of questions.
I'm Tom Elmore. I live in Moore, live in East Moore, and in the course of battling these things, folks, we had bombs set off on our front porch. We've, been run off the road. We've been strung up by the Oklahoma County District Attorney, this, that, and the other, and so on and so forth. Believe me, your wife gets tired of coming and getting you out of jail. My attorney said, well, you've gotten pretty effective, and apparently you have their attention. Here's the thing. I don't care whether you're a Democrat or Republican. Folks, you've got to pay attention. After 1999, after that great battle, a man ran for governor who had been Eastern District U.S. Attorney for the state of Oklahoma, the guy who had convicted 165 crooked county commissioners. This man had a resume of real reform, and the #1 item on his gubernatorial platform was abolish the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority. You know who got elected? Brad Henry. 8 years of Brad Henry. A guy who sat on his hands while they destroyed Union Station. We couldn't even get a meeting with him. And now, just to show you, if you think they've reformed, now Brad Henry is the chairman of the Regional Transit Authority. Brad Henry didn't give a hoot about transit or transportation or mobility. We're still in the same spot because Oklahoma voters were not paying attention. Gary Richardson ran again for governor. You know when he ran? 2018. We elected Kevin Stead, a man nobody had ever heard of. You didn't have to do much reading to get the lowdown on him. The former Eastern District Attorney who convicted the county commissioners all those years ago, he's an old man now, like a lot of us. Probably his last run. Folks, we get the government we vote for.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you. And that was the key piece of his platform for sure. Yes, please.
The question is, the time frame from when we are last contacted by OTA that they're taking our property, how long until we have to vacate if we don't fight? So no matter whether you fight or not, it will be a negotiation, and it will be in large part based upon the OTA's need, but also your ability to find something. I have done hundreds of these cases. I have never seen ATF-style people with battering rams knocking down doors. They're gonna work with you because the federal act mandates it, and so you're not gonna get evicted if you're engaged in the process. Now, if you refuse to leave, even though they've paid money into court and that process is gone, yeah, legally, at that point you're just like a tenant that hasn't paid rent. But the federal act requires that you have agents assigned to you to help finding suitable properties and finding a way to get out. Next question, what is fair market value? Good question. That is defined as what a willing seller.
That was my question.
Yes, sir.
Could you address the time frame from when we get the letter from OTA?
Sure.
How long the steps to take and how long they take?
So
there's no discussion. Are we going to have 30 days to be out of the house?
yeah, and that's a hard question to answer. The reason being, every segment of the process will be a little different, and in large part, it is driven by the timing from the engineers. So when you say last contacted by the OTA, the process will go something like this. You are contacted by an acquisition agent who you will sit down with, or you and a representative will sit down with and try to negotiate a price. If you can't find the price, they will then, if they're in a hurry, immediately file a condemnation action in district court, setting off all of those procedural dates that I mentioned. If they're not in a massive hurry, they may wait a while before they file the condemnation case.
A while is a month, a year?
It could be a month, it could be a year. Again, it depends on the segment, and it depends on where within that particular segment, because they're gonna work, my guess is they're gonna work from west to east, and so it depends on where your tract would lie within that segment and what it means from a time standpoint and a construction standpoint. Because they're not gonna go build all this at once, right? They're gonna phase it, and even within the phase, it's gonna be segmented. So it's an impossible question to answer unless you're in that process. When you're in that process, the acquisition agents are usually in a position to tell you the timing of it and what their need is.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. The question is, what is fair market value? So fair market value is defined in case law, but also in jury instructions, and it's defined as what a willing seller and a willing buyer would engage in to come to a contract price. Now, everybody understands that you wouldn't be a willing seller, but the law requires that a jury view it as if a willing buyer and willing seller were engaged in a discussion. County assessor gives an assessed value. The assessed value of your property is considered incompetent evidence in a jury trial. The reason being, everybody does what they can do to drive their assessed value as low as possible, because your assessed value is how they generate how much you owe in taxes. And so most people do everything they can to keep your assessed value low. And so because of that, it's not considered competent evidence, and it won't come into trial. Bulldozers are equal to F5 tornadoes, so full replacement value. Yes, again, you're entitled to be made whole. And what being made whole means is going to be defined by an appraiser. It's going to be defined by your team of experts that you get. Replacement value is the only fair market value. Yeah, so again, it's replacement value, it's fair market value, and the way you get there is trying to find comparable properties, whether that's difficult or not, to this gentleman's earlier point.
Are there any additional financial awards that could happen, like cost of moving or?
Yeah, so the Federal Act allows all kinds of costs, down to the gas that you would put in your car to move boxes. Again, under the theory that you're entitled to be made whole, but yeah, it covers everything. And if it's a business that's displaced, you're entitled to the advertising dollars spent to advertise in the paper, online, wherever, that you've got a new location and here's where you are. There's even provisions if you have a business that has, say you have a gravel parking lot, but you have to move to a location that the city requires pavement. So you're moving to something different, you're entitled to the extra money you had to spend because there's a government regulation to require you to do that, or fire suppression, or something like that. So yeah, there are provisions. Again, the whole theory of this, even though it doesn't feel like it, is to be made whole, and what that means becomes very subjective in these processes.
So, if you have a farm, and you have livestock equipment, and you have to move all your livestock equipment, everything you own, some other, they're gonna pay you to move your equipment.
Again, it depends on what the taking looks like. If it's a total take, yes. If it's a partial take, Maybe, maybe not. It depends on what's left. If they're not physically taking any of your property, the answer would be no. So it's hard to answer that, you know, a hypothetical, but if they're taking it and it's causing you to have to move it because they're taking, you're entitled to whatever the dollars are to move it.
Because most of these places here are family farms. You're looking at acreages. You're not
Yeah.
looking at, you know, just
Sure.
an acre or two.
So let's,
You have people that have been here 30 years, 100 years.
yeah.
And they're coming right through their property.
Understood. Let's try to, I'll answer all your questions after. Let's try to keep to the cards as much as possible.
Thank you. All right, we do have a lot of questions in regards to location and when it'll affect us. On those, on the location, I would just recommend you go to that accessoklahoma.com website, look at the maps on there. I can tell you personally, I have a problem with my computer for some reason, really struggles to load the maps. I don't know if anyone else has that same issue, it's just me.
It's out here.
But, yeah, I have a hard time getting it to load. It's like every 10th time you'll find it load. Okay, thank you. Some people are gonna fix that for me.
Mike, they're bad IT, sir.
Yes. You live in Newalla, which turnpike affects us? Probably be, I would call it the southern route. Choctaw Road and 134th. I'm not sure where it crosses Choctaw, I have to be
At
honest with you.
149,
At 149th of Choctaw.
between the two.
Yes,
So that was me.
okay.
So the one that's coming east-west over from Newcastle,
Mhm.
like it has to connect to I-40 regardless, right? So even if they stop the southern route through Norman.
That will still continue up north, yeah, yeah.
Can I comment on that?
Yeah, please.
Folks, you will drive yourselves nuts trying to figure out where this highway would be. They won't say. They don't think they have to say. They don't think they have to let anybody know anything in advance until they're ready to boot you out. I think there's a thing that, and I was going to kind of ask Mr. Box about it a little bit, but I know there are getting ready to be some actions taken on this situation regarding due process and bad faith. Bad faith is when you put something forward, especially a government agency, and you're supposed to interact with the public and you're supposed to do certain things and you don't. And OTA has done that. They have refused to answer questions. They have refused to even acknowledge that questions exist. They have refused to do a lot of stuff. And in the opinions of some pretty smart people that know more about it than I do, and their attorneys, they say that's called bad faith. And due process. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, ma'am.
I would just say for, and not to make it all about us,
Yeah.
but for those of us in the Newalla area,
Mm-hmm.
we are somewhat limited because they will connect to the Kickapoo. So there's not a lot of wiggle room on the
Yeah.
location because they're going to want to connect.
In fact, Jessica Brown, the spokesman for OTA, said in a TV interview that there's a little wiggle room, but the route's pretty much set. That's what she said. So when we say wiggle room, is that 100 yards? Is it half a mile? They won't say.
There's no wiggle room when you're connected
Yeah.
to an existing road.
Well, there you go. But trying to figure out, is it going to go here? Is it going to go there? Am I going to lose this much? Am I going to lose that much? You won't know until they contact you personally. And I think there's a gentleman back there that has.
I have 2 or 3 calls a day about one to buy my house.
Yeah.
Is there somebody out there that knows something that we don't know?
The only thing I would say is, I've been getting those calls for a year, at least, where one day, I get a call every day almost. Hey, you ready to sell your house? And I always tell them, oh, $2 million, you can come, I'll move out tomorrow, and they hang up on me.
I'm a certified information systems security professional. That's what I do for a living, is I work in cybersecurity. And 90% of the texts you're going to get and phone calls are scams. They know the bad guys know what's going on around here, and they know this is a good time to prey on people. And so they will call you up, and the next thing you know, your bank account's empty. So just hang up.
Yeah, it's,
Answer the phone, Oklahoma City homicide.
Giddy up.
all right, if the turnpike goes through, it'll be done to Choctaw Road to alleviate the increased traffic.
Yeah.
I don't know if there'll be any increased traffic it'll take 15 years to get the turnpike done, and and then another 5 before the turnpike probably starts getting into traffic on it, just based off the Kickapoo traffic. But the city will keep an eye on it. How's that? I'm sorry, that's the best answer I can give on that. Do I foresee a change in zoning along the turnpike east of Sooner?
Oh, east of Sooner.
That's a good.
That'd be down in Norman.
Well, no, it'll be Indian, if you look at the Indian Hills thing, east of Sooner. Potentially, again, I don't foresee a lot. I'm basing this really off the Kickapoo. If anyone's driven on the Kickapoo, then you'd know you were probably one of 5 people that you saw on the Kickapoo that day.
So I would say yes, that there will be a lot of changes. So the ward, for planning commission members here, what you've seen in the western side of Oklahoma City is the turnpike has fundamentally changed the nature of that development. Lots of commercial, lots of single family homes. The Kickapoo, although there's no traffic on there yet, if you look at Hera is now inundated with development. All of the large home builders have now gobbled up all the land, and there's a lot of new, I think it's like 1,500 homes are projected over the next 5 to 10 years. And so the reason that's happening is because of the full interchange right there along the Kickapoo in Hera. So it'll take a while to lag, but yes, it will change.
So that was my question, and I have a couple of follow-up
Okay.
questions, Pat, if you don't mind.
No.
First, when I talked to OTA about changing zoning and what they think the turnpike is going to bring and where the land that they take but don't use, basically how I see it is Oklahoma saying, this part of Oklahoma, we don't like that you're not developing, and so we're going to steal your land, and the additional lands that we don't take, we're going to sell to developers
Exactly right.
to build up houses and increase our state taxes. And so, I mean, that's just a concern. We're already dealing with the turnpike. How do we fight the zoning changes that might come about? Because I live off of Indian Hills, and I like that it's required to have 5 acres to build a house.
That's Norman.
No, I'm on the north side.
You're on the north side?
I'm on the north side past 24. So we're Oklahoma City. But yeah, so I was wondering what we could do to fight those changes.
Yeah.
Because we don't want to see that. We know that's what that brings, and so that's a very big concern. If we're talking this is happening anyway.
So the place that you find that is at the city level. And the notification piece is hugely important there, and to make sure that if you get notified of any zoning changes taking place in your area, reach out to your city councilman. For sure, and let them know.
Once you're notified, it's usually too late.
Yeah.
Then we're fighting it.
Okay, Mr. Stone, we're notifying you.
Okay, I'll take that as a notification.
Consider this a formal request. Can I give a really good answer?
Sure.
These guys are all on YouTube. Oklahoma City has a YouTube channel. Mr. Box is a star. I got he's a star on the YouTube channel. But the planning commission is on there, the city council is on there. I've learned a lot.
Yeah, I compare you to mine.
Because with the pandemic, I was stuck inside. I got the OEC fiber. So I watch all of the meetings and everything. So it's really important. You get the agenda, and then you watch the meeting. And
Yeah,
I think it's really important to keep up on that.
that's a great point, and I thank you for bringing that up.
Does Oklahoma City have a plan similar to Norman's 2025 plan?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes.
The city council in Norman have already said if this happens, it will trash our 2025 plan. We'll have to start over.
Yeah.
And that's what controls zoning out there.
I don't know that it would completely do that for Oklahoma City. The areas that this goes through, there's no facilities there, there's no infrastructure, water, sewer. So it may change some stuff, it's not going to change a lot. to be honest with you.
Doesn't matter then?
Do what?
It really doesn't matter then.
It does matter. It matters to me that,
There's really no infrastructure to worry about, it's just us.
well,
What he's
so
saying
what I'm
is-
saying on the infrastructure is like water and sewer. So like, you're not gonna have someone showing up at 149th and Choctaw going, okay, we're gonna put 10 acres with, 180 houses here, or something like that. It won't change the density of the zoning.
You have to have the public sewer, public water. The term hair is exploding because it has public water, public sewer. So the turnpike coupled with that, in a lot of Ward 4 in Oklahoma City, there is no public water, no public sewer. And that's not likely to change for, probably as long as everyone in this room is alive. Because it's just so far away and it's too expensive to drag sewer.
Does that answer your question? Sorry. What are the names of the people on the House floor in regards to Senate Bill 1610? Can the governor stop OTA Turnpike?
Yes.
Yes. The governor is the one that can stop it. So if you have any concerns with it, I would definitely reach out.
He already promised he'd stop it. You saw that platform.
Will we have another meeting with OTA here? Those are OTA meetings. I don't know where they're holding their meetings. Again, I wanted to hold this one without OTA so that we could just have a good open dialogue meeting.
That's a tough deal for you.
But OTA will be continuing to hold meetings through this. As you know, they're holding one in Noble tonight. I'm sure it's a blast to be there. But they'll be holding other meetings as well. I saw there's going to be one in Norman Moore. I haven't seen one announced for Oklahoma City yet, so I was kind of surprised at that. That's a good OTA question. Where does it go exactly? Again, pull up accessoklahoma.com, take a look at that map. OTA was at an ACOG meeting the other day. The one comment they made that I thought was kind of interesting is that on that map, in some places, the right-of-way, if you tried to extrapolate it out, the distance of it, some of it is about 1,200 feet wide. And typically, I think they were saying that the widest they would need for the turnpike was about 600 feet. So when they talk about that wiggle room, there is a little bit of wiggle room. Mm-hmm.
Total width.
Total width.
600 feet.
Is their typical.
We'll take more at exits.
Yeah, at exits and other spots, there may be more, but they're typical along the stretch of the highway, 600.
Oh, I might keep my house.
There's a Chamber of Commerce meeting coming up that Joe Kelly, the executive director for OTA, is going to be the hosted speaker at. And only chamber members are allowed to attend. So if you're a chamber member, go there and ask him your questions and see how far you get. Because the Norman City Council didn't get very far.
Oh, I'm sorry.
There will be an Oklahoma City Chamber of Commerce meeting coming up. Is it next week? Or the week after that?
Which is it?
Next week?
No.
No, the General Chamber of Commerce for Oklahoma City. Joe Kelly, one of the directors for OTA, is the featured speaker at that meeting. Only chamber members are allowed to show up and get in, and you have to register in advance.
But you can, non-chamber members can get in too, but you have to pay.
That isn't what the ad said, but that'd be awesome. Yeah, how much does it cost?
I think it's 25 or 50 bucks.
25 bucks. You can go ask your questions personally of an OTA director.
All right, this is a brilliant question. What is the rate of the return on the bonds? Someone's wanting to invest and make some money. I have no idea. I have no idea what the rate of the return on the bonds would be.
I hear Russian bonds were going really well about 2 months ago.
And when does each part of the turnpike pay for itself? Again, that'll be one that I forward to OTA.
He'll never.
Yeah, never.
Yeah, I lost my shirt on those Russian bonds.
When will we know the 100% of the routes? That's a great question. I wish, I would just, again, follow up with the Access Oklahoma site. The Kickapoo was pushed through even though people fought against it. What makes us think we can stop this? Just real quickly, you know, I think Dave kind of covered this question really well, but look at those sites that he mentioned in his presentation. If you weren't able to capture those sites, then feel free to talk to him after this meeting. The only way I know of personally to stop this is if Governor Stitt decides that, you know, maybe this isn't the right thing to do right now. That's the only way I know if we can get to stop this. Now, he is in an election cycle, so it is a good time to let your voice be heard, because he'll be listening a lot harder now than he will be after the election.
I can say what makes it different. What makes it different is we haven't quit. We're still at it. And I'm sure lots of people told George Washington, George, you can't fight the king? Are you crazy? Cut a deal. Look what happened to those other guys that tried. Well, praise the Lord, George kept going.
Thanks. Go ahead.
Yeah, the question is, I just want to know how much time I have to stay at my home if they're going to take it, get it over with. So, I mean, that's where what I would suggest is get with the OTA. If you're in the path, there is some value in getting it over with, so to speak, and trying to come to terms that are favorable to you, and finding, you know, your next place to stop. All the people I represented on that Western Loop had very favorable results doing that early and not standing in the way. They got compensated in a manner that was different than the people that got compensated on the eastern side.
All right, what does the state of Oklahoma intend to do about OTA? That's a great question. I would just recommend that folks talk to your state legislators, your House of Representatives, your senators, state senators, and let them know what your feelings are. Because that's... I'm sorry, to what?
You're not going to give that one to the OTA?
I'll be more than happy to give it to the OTA.
Okay.
Because that's a good question. But, you know, honestly, I recommend talk to your state legislators and, you know, see if they can't generate some movement there. It's interesting seeing a state agency that has no oversight by the legislature, even through funding, which is usually how they control a lot of the other agencies. If the agency does something they don't like, they take away the funding. OTA, they can't do that.
Who elected the people of the OTA?
They're appointed.
Appointed by the governor. My point exactly.
Right.
I just make the point, folks, that until 1995, it was unheard of for the Highway Department, later known as ODOT, to have the same director as the Turnpike Authority. The reason there is a Turnpike Authority is because it is unconstitutional for a state agency to do what the Turnpike Authority does, specifically in financing. However, our Supreme Court now winks at it. And today, as of 1995 with Frank Keating and Neil McCaleb, this ODOT and OTA have the same director. He is also Secretary of Transportation. The current director of these agencies is a landscape architect. He's not even an engineer. I've known him since he was a kid. He couldn't put 3 words together at a podium without a script. I'm telling you this. But we have allowed this to happen because we have allowed the corporatization and the corruption of our state government. And the first way we did that was to vote the legislative term limit in 1990.
Thank you. All right. What basis does OTA use to determine when a turnpike is needed? Well,
The governor waves his wand over a
I'm
map.
sure there's some traffic studies and bond debt studies that go into that. So anyway, that's going to bring us to the conclusion. And I really do appreciate all of you coming out. And again, if you don't mind, I'm going to go ahead and wrap the meeting up. If you want to talk to any of the 3 of us, please feel free to. But thank y'all again for coming out tonight. I appreciate everyone's being cordial and polite, and hopefully you got some information that you found useful.
Appreciate
So,
you, Todd.
thank you.